All right, this is your boy D back with another video on You Can Be Free. I got my brother in Christ, my new friend, what I call him, Reverend Ronnie Jones with us tonight. He's gonna be sharing his story, calling all the way from Michigan. I know the story, but I was just telling him, and I said this on You Can Be Free before, that oftentimes, most 90% of the time when I hear these testimonies, I always learn something new. So I'm excited. Matter of fact, when he told me just a little bit about his story I think it was last weekend. And I was like, dang, like I want to hear some more of this, just the way that he was telling it. There's certain people when they tell stories, there's an anointing on it. So if you hit the play button, I just ask that you just stay, listen to the end. As I said, I'm excited to hear it myself, so I'm not going to waste a lot of time doing a lot of talking. I'm just going to pass it to you. I know your story. I always tell people to start wherever they want to when it comes to telling their testimony, but I know you was attacked by the enemy all the way when you was a child, So if you could just go back to share that story and then just kind of talk about the things that led you to where you are now.
Yeah, so what's going on, everybody? Reverend Jones, Ronnie Jones, however you want to call me. Um, my story is one that is unique. Um, when God has a calling on your life, it starts at the very beginning, and so that's how I got to start the story. Um, so when I was born, I had an issue with my stomach. I was about 5 months, 6 months old, couldn't hold water down, couldn't hold milk down. Took me to all kind of different doctors, and doctors didn't know what the condition was, didn't know what my issue was. um, and they pretty much gave up on me because I couldn't hold nothing down. They couldn't figure out what was wrong. um, and so they gave me until 5 years old if I made it that long. But thank God for a praying mama and a praying daddy. um, at the time, there was a revival being held at my home church. L.W. Bolton was running the revival. And my dad brought me in and asked Bolton to pray for me. And that was on a Monday night. And Bolton didn't do it until Friday night. And as he came out of the pastor's office and walked in the sanctuary, the Spirit of God fell on him. And he hollered for my dad to bring me to him. And in front of the whole entire packed house, he laid his hands on me and prayed over me. And a couple weeks later, my parents was able to throw the little medicine that they were trying to give me away. Um, and here I am, 41 years old, still standing strong, still on the battlefield. Um, then I grew up in the church. And this is the part that gets kind of crazy. I grew up in the church and knew about God. My dad was the chairman of the deacon board. So I knew my way around the people of God. But just like any child, once you get older, you start to smell yourself. And I didn't want to do the church thing no more. Um, I was 17 years old and in high school, and I heard God's voice clear as day calling me to preach. But my thing is I questioned God. How can I be 17 years old and tell people that 60 and 70, 80 years old what you're saying? They're never going to believe me. I ain't experienced life yet. I ain't been through nothing. Um, so I ran from it. Man, I went out there, graduated at 17. I started partying, drinking, smoking, running women, man. I did everything that you could possibly think of. Started selling drugs, I mean, everything. There wasn't a day that you wouldn't catch me, not high, drunk, or something. Um, and then after that, I was sitting there with my wife now. It was before we both fully committed to God. I was sitting there before we got married, and I was in a bad surroundings. Started drinking and smoking, and I almost had a heart attack. Got rushed to the hospital. Blood pressure was 225 over 188. Doctors didn't know how I walked in. Um, Doctor told me that night I needed to quit that stuff and because it was going to kill me. And the moment he released me from the hospital, I went back home and tested the waters. I started smoking. Nothing happened. Um, then I popped a couple pills and then started drinking. And later that evening, I started smoking again, and I was smoking heavy. Um, and almost had
And
another
this is
heart attack
after you left the hospital.
after I left the hospital. After the doctor told me it was going to kill me because my heart couldn't take it because of all the drugs and alcohol and everything that I was doing. Um, it was damaging my heart. And so he told me that even marijuana, and some, we grew up saying marijuana can't kill you. Man, I'm a living testimony. It will take you out the box if you ain't careful. If you ain't careful, Satan, man, he was after me. And it got rushed right back to the hospital. And it was funny because it was 24 hours later. It was the same doctor that seen me in the ER the night before. And when he walked in, he said, "Didn't I tell you it was going to kill you?" And after he released me, I remember what my daddy said: when death is on your tail, you need to get away and have a talk with God because there is something God wants from you. And that's exactly what I did. And I'll never forget the date. It was January 6th. Um, I went home, back home. I left. I told my wife then, we wasn't married. I said, "Look, I can't do this. I got to go home."
And how
And I
old were
went back.
you at this point?
20. I was 20, getting ready to turn 21. Getting ready to
Okay.
turn 21. Because it was January 6th of that year of 2005. And so, yeah. And I went home and went back to mom and daddy, went in the room, closed the door, did like them old folks. I heard them say it, so I tried it. I closed the door, and for 3 days, I didn't eat, drink, nothing. It was just me and God. And at that moment, God spoke to me and he said, "I told you what I wanted you to do. Now go and do it, because if not, I will take you completely out of this world." And I said, "God, here I am." And I accepted my calling in January. Had a conversation, went back to church and everything, joined back in with the church. And then I had a conversation with my pastor about my calling.
Hold on
And
one second. Hold on one second. So let me ask you this.
mm-hmm,
So what about all these desires that you had when it comes to drinking and when it comes to smoking weed? Because I know when it came to the weed, you couldn't do it. The drugs and stuff
mm-hmm.
like that. Did the drugs and the weed, did that just leave you? Or did you try that again after?
No, no, because I was too scared.
Okay,
Because
okay.
that was the commitment that I made to God, that if He could take that away from me, then I wouldn't go back to it. I went through a detox, man. I mean, when you see on TV of the shaking, the sweating, and all of, I went through that, and it was nothing fun. It was nothing fun, and it wasn't nothing. And see, when I tell people how addicted to marijuana I was, um, it wasn't nothing for me to drop 10 blunts a day, easy,
Right.
and a joint in between. I could drink a gallon in a day, like it wasn't nothing. Um, and it was scary, because now that I look back on it, I should have died. But when God has a calling on your life, man, the Bible don't lie. He dispatched angels around your bedside,
Right.
even when you don't realize it. They're there to protect you. And when His hand is on you, and you finally admit you wrong, yeah, God protects you. God protects you. So I ended up, finally accepting my calling, stood in front of the church in February and acknowledged my calling. Mind you, I just walked off the street and went back home in January. And Palm Sunday, April of that year, the third Sunday of that year, go check the calendar if you don't believe me, 2005, I preached my first sermon, 5 months off of the streets. And Palm Sunday of next year, I would have preached 20 years if the Lord says the same. 20 years.
Okay. So what was life like? No, let me ask you this. I don't know. You wasn't married at that point, right?
So me and my wife, and it was funny because when I left, neither one of us wanted to deal with each other. We could even be around each other, couldn't stand it being around each other. But after I had accepted my calling and I had started preaching, she called me and she just out the blue said, "Look, we need to talk."
Oh yeah, talk about that. I remember you was telling me about that.
Yeah, so it was funny because I grew up in the church. She came to the church later in life. So she didn't know all about God like I did. And I knew of God, but I didn't know who God was. Um, and there's a difference. There's a big difference.
Explain
Um,
that. Explain that.
Okay, so there's a lot of church folk walking around saying they know God,
Come on.
but a lot of them only know of God.
Right.
And the difference is when you know God, you have a personal relationship with God. And there's some things that you won't and can't do because the fear of God is in you.
Mm,
Those that know of God don't have a problem going to church on Sunday and showing up at the club on Sunday night.
mm,
Big difference.
right.
There's a big difference. So, you know, so my wife calls me, and it's crazy because her pastor had told her that she was going to marry a preacher. Neither one of us knew this, you know, while we were dating. It wasn't until after I accepted my calling that God spoke to her and she called me. And we've been rocking ever since. Ever since. And we actually made it official. We started dating again on my birthday, June 2nd. And yeah, and we got married January 6th. The same day I left a year later, we got married.
So this is it's a lot going on in this year. In January is when the situation happened when you pretty much uh surrender to God, and then you
Yep.
go back to church, and then you preach a couple of months later in April. Then you
Mm-hmm.
reunite with your ex in June the 2nd for your birthday. And then so now you are this young man, and you just left one world, which is the
Mm-hmm.
world. Now
Mm-hmm.
you're walking with God.
Mm-hmm.
So me and you were talking, and we were talking about how at that point in time, because me and you the same age,
Yep.
at that point in time, I didn't see a lot of young ministers at that point. Now
Right.
it is more common.
Mm-hmm.
So can you talk about like what was life like? Like how did you uh deal with jumping from worlds? Because I had to come out of the world, but it wasn't that quick. I didn't have so much happen at once. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it was a little different. So can you
Mm-hmm.
talk about what your 20s was like trying to
Man.
you got this title on you, you know what I mean? But then you still got
Right.
the world. One thing that I will say though, like the good thing is that you didn't have social media. We didn't have it back then. So you couldn't see what
Man.
all your friends was doing. But at the same
Right.
time, like what I seen is I was consistently hearing about it. So can you
Right.
talk about what was life like for you at that age, you know, going through that as a
So
reverend?
yeah, so it was funny because, and I have to talk about my trial sermon because, like you said, I walked away from the world, and in 5 months I started preaching. So my church home could easily sit 500. That church didn't have no sitting room. It was people standing around the walls because they couldn't believe that I walked away from the streets into the church, and then not just into the church but into the pulpit, and so it was rough because a lot of people for 10 years held that over my head. They remember what I used to do. So it was difficult, and then I was the youngest Baptist preacher in my city to ever accept their calling. And it was some pulpits that I wasn't able to go in, and some offices that I couldn't go in because of my age. I would sit in the audience on the front row, you know. And I didn't get angry. I just understood my place. I get it. You know, for an older preacher to hear about a 20, 21-year-old kid accepting this calling, yeah, right. Okay, you got to prove yourself. And then dealing with the temptation on all of it. So I'll say it as easy as I possibly can. I did all my sinning and still in the pulpit. As simple as that. Yeah, I mean, when the temptation came, and especially in the first couple years, I didn't understand what it meant to be a man of God. So it wasn't nothing that I could find a little small hole in the wall away from my community, from my neighborhood, and go in and drink. So I still had that portion. I just never went back to the marijuana. I
Mm,
said, okay, I left the marijuana alone because I knew that would kill me. But yeah, I can go drink with no problem. Um, and then I had issues, of trying to keep myself to my wife. And I'll just put it like that. It was rough, because there's so much temptation out there being so young. Um, and it took a while. It took a while, almost 10 years before I finally just, okay, this is who I am. And God had to sit me down and humble me. And so, I mean, now you couldn't get me to do that stuff. You couldn't get me to do that stuff. Now I'm realizing I'm a pillar in my community because I live a block away from where I grew up.
Mhm.
And so that's where I'm at. You know, I encourage any person that's young, and I tell them all the time, if God could turn me around after all that I've been through early in my ministry, trust me, he can turn you around. Um, and that's just dealing with my ministry. Then life goes on. I lost my mom, then 10 years almost to the date, I lost my dad. I have no grandparents, no aunts, no uncles. It's legitly just me and my wife. So we don't have that shoulder or that person we can just pick up the phone and call. I buried sisters and brothers and stuff. So there's not too many people I can legitly call but God. And so I encourage anybody, if you have your loved ones, you love them while you can. God gives them to you for a reason. Unfortunately, God seen fit for them to go, and call them home. And I'm still here. I'm still striving for heaven as my home. So that's where I'm at with that.
So before we get to like the present, uh, what helped you get through that? Because now I'm talking about like all the deaths, losing your parents and not having a strong support system because you know I've seen it, with people that can get into a place, especially like when you are in ministry. We are servants
Mhm.
of Jesus Christ. So
Right.
we serve him, we serve the community, we serve his people, And I've seen where people, when they go through something like that, um, they just get into a place where they don't want to be bothered with ministry, with people, with doing anything for God because they feel like he didn't come through for them. What helped you in that time, like deal with that when you are believing God to do something and you're serving and doing this stuff for God and you feel like, I'm not saying how you feel, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but when
Right.
certain things like that has, happened.
So when I lost my mom, and believe me, I was a mama's boy, just because
I
of
was too.
everything I went through, as a baby and everything. My mom kept me close to her. The day my mom died, it was on a Sunday. My late pastor was sick at the time, and he couldn't be at church on Sunday morning. My mom died at 7 a.m. When my brother and my dad called me and told me my mom had passed, what got me through is I got up, shaved, showered, put on my suit because I had a job to do. And I showed up at the hospital, told them what they needed to do, and I went to church. And I actually preached at 11 o'clock that morning, 4 hours after my mom passed away. That's what got me through losing my mom. Um, and then I had my moments where I would break and break down. But what got me through was my family, my wife, and my children. When I lost my dad, that hit me harder than anything. Um, and I almost threw in the towel at that moment. That was the moment because me and my dad had got so close. And then I was taking care of him too because of dementia. And me and him had a bond that was unbreakable. And when I almost lost him, man, when he passed away, I sat in the bathroom with my head in the toilet, legitly losing myself. I didn't want to go to church. I didn't want to preach no more. I didn't want to do any of that because I was questioning God. How could you leave me by myself? And then it was my wife that heard me like crying in the middle of the floor, just wailing and crying. And she came out and she said, "This is not the husband I married. You stronger than that. You are a man of God. Pull yourself together and get through this because God ain't gonna put more on you than you can bear." And it was the words that she said to me at that moment that woke me up mentally and spiritually. And that's what got me through. God speaks to her when I'm not listening to him.
Mm.
And that's what got me through. That's what got me through. I mean, because God woke her up out of a dead sleep. It was 5 o'clock in the morning, and she was dead to the world. Just got off of work at 3 o'clock in the morning, and God woke her up and said, "Go, go, go, talk to your husband because he's not listening." And that's what got me through it.
I
That's
appreciate
what
you
got.
sharing that, man, because a lot of times when it comes to people in ministry, uh, especially pastors, bishops, reverends, whatever the case may be, um, people will dehumanize us. There was a time in my life where I had lost my nephew, and then I had got sick, and I was dealing with a lot of stuff, and I was just consistently getting calls, of what
Mhm.
people needed me to do for them, whether if it was like talk to their husband, talk to their nephew, talk to their son, because at the end of the day, when people are in pain, they're not thinking about nothing else. They want that
Right,
pain to stop, or when they're seeing one of their loved ones in pain, they
right.
want that pain to stop. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
sometimes they see us as the answer, and they can create, false idols out of us,
Right,
and then, at the same time, like when we disappoint them, uh it's almost like, oh dang, how can you not do this? You know what I mean? Like
right,
when we are men of God and we are called and we are chosen by God, and God hand is on our lives, but at the same time we're human, and then sometimes people don't see that, and they don't realize like we go through the same stuff that they go through, if not more, really.
right.
Sometimes the attacks are worse just because of the call of God that is over our life. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Well,
um
and I'm gonna share this with it as well. Is
Okay.
one thing people have to understand is they have the preacher to go to when they're going through their life troubles. But as a preacher, who do we have to go to? We got to carry not only the people's burdens, but then we have to carry ours as well.
Right.
And that's the thing that, I try to be like an open book. I let people see when I'm hurting because it gives them hope. Well, if the preacher hurting, then if he can make it through what he going through, then there's hope for us too. There's no, I mean, yeah, we have the calling on our lives, but we have to make it in just like everybody else. So that's the piece that I really want people to pay attention to is because yeah, we can have our own circle as preachers, but sometimes they got their own stuff to deal with. And you try to be as cordial as possible and not try to be a burden on somebody. So it's just really you.
That's
So
true.
yeah.
That's true. So we talked about, how your 20s was in ministry, and you was talking about how after those 10 years, things got a little better as far as like your obedience to God. So how would you explain like the last 5 years of ministry up until now? What has life been like for you?
It's had its good and it's had its bad. Um the good thing is now people see that I haven't went nowhere, because I started so young. They are just now accepting, okay, Jones ain't went nowhere. He's here to stay. Um, so you got that. But then on the bad side, you have betrayal, you have letdown, you have hurt. And I've experienced all of that. Um, I don't believe in anything called church hurt. I don't believe in that and the reason why I don't believe in church hurt is because our job hurts us, but yet we show up.
Every day. Yep.
The hospital misdiagnosed us, but yet we go back. School was a letdown, but yet we still attend. Relationships have failed, but yet we jump in another. So I can't say that, because you was so-called hurt at church, you should stop going. Maybe you just need to change your surrounding. Um, and so with that, I mean, now in the last 5 years, I've had more opportunities to preach the gospel in the last 5 years than I just about have my entire ministry. Just because people see that I'm not going nowhere. I'm as humble as you possibly can make it, and I'm not bragging. It's just that that's what I am. Um, and so, yeah, I think the hardest thing in the last 5 years was the betrayal because it was from somebody that I held close to me and I looked up to and respected.
You want to elaborate on that, or you want to keep that short?
I'll just say it like this, and I'm gonna keep it as clean as I possibly can. Be careful who you confide in. Be careful who you call your spiritual dad, spiritual mom, because they are still man. And I'll just say it like that.
I got you. I never asked one of my guests this before when it comes to questions, but I don't know. I just feel led to just ask you this. For some reason, I feel like that you could be someone who could be labeled, or not labeled, but somebody who is misunderstood. So what is a misconception about you that you would want people to know? Like something that, yeah,
It's actually something that I've been called to my face in the church.
what's that?
I'm I'm arrogant, cocky, and stuck up. I'm none of that.
So talk about the real you, who you really are.
I am one that understand who I will not say I know everything about God. I will never say that because every day you wake up, you learn something new. But when you have a relationship with God, you know what God is capable of doing. And when you know what God is capable of doing, even in your lowest moment, it makes you walk with your head up and not down.
Right.
It makes you walk with your chest out, not sunk in. So people will misconstrue that I'm arrogant. You're right. I'm arrogant in God because I know who God is and who I serve. Because, like I said, if you listen to my story, everything I've been through, I realized that if it had not been for God on my side and that was his plan for my life, I would have been dead a long time ago. But I thank God he has kept me here in spite of all of my shortcomings, all my letdowns that I have done to him, not to man, but to him. And he still let me see another day. So you doggone right. I'm arrogant in that sense. Yes, I am. I'm misunderstood because I don't understand how people can go to church. I will say it like this: go to the sanctuary after God has kept them through everything they've been through in life. You heard my story. My story is not your story. So don't try to say you can walk in my shoes. But at the end of the day, we all got a story to tell.
Right.
And the story is God has kept us down through the years, through everything we've been through, and we walk into his house quiet. That part I don't understand. So I
Right.
talk about
Yeah.
it. If you love God the way you say you do, then how is it that you can show up to worship Sunday morning, but act a donkey Monday through Saturday? That's the part that I don't get. And I speak about it
Mm-hmm.
from the pulpit to the back door. So people don't like that about me because I don't know when to be quiet.
Yeah, I was
So
getting that in my spirit, man. Like I've never asked nobody this, and we didn't talk about this before, but I
that's
feel
fine.
like God was telling me that this man is misunderstood. And it's interesting that you was telling me about how people think some of these things about you, especially when it being arrogant, because before we even start recording, you was letting me know like you want me to talk too. You know what I mean? I was like,
Right.
I'm giving this to you, but you were, you know what I mean? You went up front like that's not you. And I can see, I have discernment, so I can see people, but
Mhm.
other people can't. Some people see
Right.
people in the lens of the past or the lens of somebody who reminds them of somebody else, and they're not seeing people for who they are.
Right.
And God was just sharing like this man is misunderstood. That's why it just came out of nowhere. You know what I mean?
Right. And I mean, so so I'll give you a prime example. Everybody calls me arrogant and stuck up and cocky and this, that, and the other. Um, the year after everything opened back up after COVID, for my birthday, I gathered a bunch of supplies for the homeless on my birthday. I didn't take time to celebrate my birthday. I celebrated my birthday with the homeless people. That's who I am, because what we do to the least of them,
Come on.
God holds us accountable. So if God gave me one more year of life, I would rather spend it with somebody that is going through something far worse than me. And it's crazy because when I did this, I ran into a man I had worked with who was very intelligent, was a team leader. And I mean, he was smart as smart. He knew the company in and out. And I ran into him, and it brought tears to my eyes because he's living on the streets with a broken ankle at the time. And I almost didn't recognize who he was. And to see him in that condition, knowing that I was headed that direction, and God gave me one more year of life with my family and everything. And so when I look at other people and I'm in my condition, I used to be one that complained about my car won't start. But now I'm at the point when things don't go my way. I think of that one guy I used to work with. Why am I sitting here complaining? At least I still got a roof over my head. He don't. I
Right.
know what I'm gonna eat tomorrow. He don't. So my heart is to the people that just a little bit less fortunate than I am. And yeah, that's me. That's who I am. And I want to help them, and seeing our children going the way they are, that's what hurts me the most. It ain't the ones that I'm seeing sitting up in church that's been there, 40 years and they still the same way they were 40 years ago. What
Mhm.
about these children that don't know who God is, that don't even know the Lord's Prayer, that don't even know, now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep? Our children don't even know that. But they can open up a tablet and look up anything on YouTube or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever. That's where my heart is.
And that's what I wanted you to share, because the thing about this is when we are in front of people and we're speaking and doing stuff like that, there's a lot that people won't see. And even as you was talking, something else I was picking up in my spirit too, that there's a lot that you have done that people just don't know about and they don't get to see your heart. So I'm glad that you expressed that, because there's a lot of stuff that I do like on a day. I was just talking to my dad before me and you had started recording. He was like, I know you doing a lot of stuff right now with people. I know you got a lot of stuff going on. I started laughing because I'm like, dang, he just don't know how much. Well, I did tell him, but he just didn't have any idea how much I've been doing today. There's stuff that's not even about me. Even what we're doing right now, it's not about us.
Right.
It's about us trying to reach somebody. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
I realized, man, through this journey, like with the things that we do, it's very important as men of God that we know who we are. Because at the end of the day, regardless of what any person may think or say, and this is for anybody, even if it's a
Right.
woman or whatever, any Christian needs to really know who they are,
Right.
because sometimes people will find validation or confirmation in other people. And
Mm-hmm.
what happens is when they don't get that same validation or confirmation, they feel low. When they get it, they feel high. But when you are rooted in Jesus and you know who you are, can't nobody tell you who you're not.
No,
Um, so I'm glad, I appreciate you sharing that. But as far as like today, like what is life like as far as like, you know, things that you have going on now? And then also, if someone was to see this, uh I know you're in Michigan, but whether if they were in Florida or wherever else and they wanted you to come speak at that church, how can they get in touch with you?
so they can reach me on, I have actually two Facebook pages. One is where I deal mostly directly with my ministry. Is r.l.jones. Um, that's one page, or they can reach me on Ronnie Jones, Ronnie Jones. They can reach me on Facebook. Yeah, that they can hit me that way. I don't have a problem with putting my phone number out there. 616-723-7376. You can call me. One thing about this, when I accepted my calling, God didn't give me no office hours. So my phone stays on all night long. And I always tell people, if I don't answer on the first time, just keep calling. I sure gonna answer after a while. Um, but
And
yeah,
I
that's
always
how they can reach
hold on
me.
for a second. I always tell my people now, because when it comes to YouTube, I don't have no control of that because anybody can see that. But if y'all one of my friends don't be calling this man acting crazy, don't let me just y'all don't let it be nobody I know. But I appreciate you doing that because I've never heard nobody give out that number.
Man,
But that again, that shows where your heart is because
right.
I've opened up myself last year when I had this program called You Can Be Free for anybody that wanted to sign up for it. So I appreciate that. But y'all know I don't play no games. Anybody I know, y'all call him, come right
Man,
for real. You know what I mean?
hey, I tell you like this. I also know how to be cordial on a hang up.
Yeah.
So but yeah, but no, because that's I think one of the biggest flaws is when the man of God or a woman of God cannot be reached. And
Facts.
it's too much of that going around. You have to call during office hours. I don't like office hours. God didn't give us no office hours. He Jesus, if Jesus sat with the sinners for him to be reached, what makes you think you should not be reached?
Right.
So that's the reason why I did that. That's the reason why I am like that. But like you said, nonsense, I don't tolerate nonsense. Don't call at begging for money and all of that. If you need counseling, you need guidance, I'm always available for that. Always.
I will
Life
say
not
this though. I just say I say stuff like that, not necessarily for people that I actually got a good support system. I got a good crowd on Facebook.
right.
There has been people who's reached out to some of my guests that's been on here. They always was cool, but I just let people know for future references that what I say still remain because I didn't say that before. Like, don't call people be acting. You know what I mean? I'm still like that. I
Right.
haven't changed. I still stand on business when it comes to that. But I appreciate you for that. Um, when it comes to things that you have like going on now, or things that you're about to start doing, can you talk about that?
So right now I'm in a what you would call a stagnant position. God has me at a stagnant position, so I accept engagements from time to time. Right now, my biggest focus has been my best friend who actually started preaching well after me, but he is in his first year of pastoring now. So I help him from time to time. The whole month of June, even on my birthday, I was with him. He took a sabbatical for the whole month, and I was there until I got sick for the whole month. And then, so, I helped him. There's a couple vacant churches that, here in my city that I have helped from time to time. But as far as anything right now, I'm really stagnant because I'm watching because God's going to do something and
That's
I'm
right.
trying not to get ahead of him. Um, and I'm sitting back waiting for him to say, okay, now, once he gives me that, then it's all gloves off and let's go to work. But right now, he wants me to be observant. And I don't know why. I don't question it. He said, watch. So that's what I'm doing. I'm sitting back watching.
I respect it, man, because that is sometimes, man, that's a hard thing for people to do is just be still,
Mm-hmm.
and wait on God.
Right.
Because I see a lot of people, it's like they moving, quickly, and they can get impatient. And I was just talking to one of my prayer partners uh earlier about how it was something me and him had came into an agreement about my life and
Mm-hmm.
prayer. And the thing is this, I have a time limit that I needed certain things done. I needed a door to
Right.
open, but looking back on it, like I'm so thankful that doors did not open until
Man.
just yesterday because when it did, it happened so perfectly. And it
Right.
blessed me, man, because God, I was just telling him this, like the fact that God did this so perfectly for me, Like it's a
Mhm.
small prayer request. I just wanted it to happen a certain type of way. But that's the
Right,
thing about God. Like He thinks of us. You know, the Bible says,
right,
"What is man that He thinks so much of us?" And
right.
it makes me realize, man, anytime I'm in a period of my life of waiting on just watching for God and things are not happening, doors are not opening, it's the wait is always going to be worth it.
Yep.
Uh, so my last question to you, man, is what word do you have for somebody that may watch this that could be a young preacher or somebody you've done been through a lot, man. You know, you lost both parents, you've went through some stuff of betrayal, and you
Mhm.
have a small circle, but you still are here. You're
Right,
still here and you're still serving God. You know what I mean? And I'm
right.
really encouraged and inspired and proud of you, man.
I appreciate that.
I definitely don't want you to take that lightly because that's powerful. Because a lot of people have done been through what you've been through, and they
Mhm.
just didn't make it. You know,
Right.
but you still online with me right now. So, what word do you have for somebody that may watch this and just need
My
encouragement?
my first suggestion would be make sure you have a tight relationship with God. Have a tight relationship with God. Because in the portion of the 19 years that I've been preaching, I've had a pastor, my late pastor. I sat under him for a year and a half in the ministry, basically my entire life. But as a preacher, sat under him a year and a half. I sat under my wife's pastor about 2 years. And then I sat under my last pastor for approximately 10 years. Um, and so when you do the math, that don't add up to 19. So that's the reason why I said stay with a tight relationship with God because it's God who's led me to where I am now. Um, and then if you are lucky to have a great pastor, because not every pastor is a great pastor. If your pastor does not scold you or correct you, I suggest you might want to, because a great pastor is not one that's going to tell you when you're doing well, but one that is going to also tell you when you're not and going to hold you accountable for your actions. And the reason why I said that, when me and my wife before we got married, we were in the dating portion. I lived with her, and my pastor found out, and he sat me down, would not even let me in the pulpit. He held me accountable. You cannot preach the gospel if you're shacking up, even though we did not sleep in the same room. And I told him that. He still sat me down. So he held me accountable, and I'm thankful for that. Um, and so I definitely say take the wisdom from the elder preachers and pastors, because that's how I've made it, is off their wisdom, because there's not many true patriarchs left. And so I remember their teaching of when I was growing up, and that's something that is going to be play a vital role. The last thing that I must say, and I must stress, balance yourself. Balance yourself. You only can do so much. But if you don't take time out for yourself,
Come
take
on, man.
time out from your family, your ministry can collapse quick as it has started. It can collapse. You need that time for yourself. And when I say take time for yourself, Monday is my day of rest. And when I say I rest, I don't have church on my mind. I ain't got the Bible on my mind. I may just say my prayer that day may just consist of thank you, God, for another day. And that is it. Because I'm taking time for myself and focus on me. So that's my encouragement. And trust me, you gonna have some good days and some bad days, and you gonna have people walk away from you. That's fine. As long as you still walking with God, that's all that matters. That's it.
Hey, I
That's it.
hear you, brother. I hear you, man. And I got to take some of that for myself too, because that balance, I'm just now starting to learn that. I'm telling a lot of people no, and I like it. Uh, I'm treating myself, you know, because I do so much, you know, and I'm learning to take more time for myself. But I love everything that you said, especially the first thing when you said have that relationship with God, because that's for everybody, regardless if you're a pastor or not, because the Bible says in Matthew 6:33, seek him first,
Hmm.
his righteousness, and all
Right.
these other things will be added. And sometimes we're seeking other things. We're doing the opposite. We're seeking other things, not putting him first.
Right.
And so yeah, man, I love what you said. I want to thank you for coming on, man. I respect you. I respect even the maturity too, because when we got to the point where I was asking you about what happened, I wasn't thinking about it at the time, but a lot of people, man, use certain situations to just bash people, and you didn't do that. You know what I mean? And that just
Right.
shows your maturity. We got to see your heart and just know you a little better. So I want to thank you for your story and your time, man. And I just want to end this like I always do, no matter what you're going through. You may not be able to relate to some of the stuff that he said when it comes to actually being in ministry, but it may be some other points of his life where he was talking about betrayal or drug addiction or just the loss of a loved one. Just know no matter what you're going through, no matter what you have been through, that you can be free, because who the Son has set free is free indeed. I
Free
love
indeed.
y'all, and we are out.